Hello, wonderful leaders. I wanted to come to you today from Istanbul to tell you a little bit about inner chatter. So, have you ever noticed that sometimes it feels like there's a lot of people talking in your mind, not just you? It sometimes comes up when you hear things in your head like, part of me wants to do this and part of me wants to do that. Or sometimes it might be a specific voice. My inner critic is really loud today. Could also be a specific person in your life. Like I always hear my mom's voice talking to me and telling me what to do. So those are the kinds of inner chatter that all of us experience. You're not going crazy. You don't have multiple personality disorder. Everyone experiences this kind of self-talk. And it's totally okay. But there are ways to manage it and to help your inner mind get quieter. One easy way is mindfulness practices, which I strongly encourage everyone to try. But today's work is going to be really about getting to know those inner voices a little bit better. One of the really important ways to try to get that inner chatter quieter is by getting to know each of those different parts and each of those different voices. Language is incredibly powerful. Language allows us to master different concepts and different worlds. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but when you put a name to somebody and you get to know them on a first name basis, they become so much easier to deal with and understand. When you're an anonymous face out there, it's hard to pull out each person's uniqueness. And that's what I'd love to invite you to do with your own inner chatter. How can you get to know your inner voices a little bit better? And by doing that, by naming the different parts of you and by developing language to talk to them and have one voice be different than the other and recognizable from the crowd, you gain mastery over that inner chatter in a way that you've never experienced before. So this is going to be our first lesson in the mind portion of our Leadership Bootcamp course. How do you get to master the inner chatter within our minds? Now, there was a movie about this, exactly this topic. It's called Inside Out. It's published by Pixar and distributed by Disney. And the way that this was developed was actually through the consultation with some amazing emotion researchers and psychologists, most notably of which is Paul Ekman, who I had the privilege of working with during my PhD program. The premise of Inside Out is that there's this girl, Riley, and she has inner chatter and voices in her head. You actually get to see a control room inside of her brain in which all of this action is taking place. There are 5 characters for her. Those are joy, fear, anger, disgust, and sadness. When Riley experiences them, you come to discover that each one of them plays a specific role in Riley's life. Joy is there, and the role she plays is to keep her happy. Joy also represents Riley's self. It's the core identity of Riley, the one that she identifies with the most, and the one that she is present with and represents who she is at her best. There's fear, whose job it is to keep her safe. Anger, whose job it is to take care of anything that might make Riley scared. There's disgust, who prevents Riley from being poisoned either by physical things in the actual world or also by the social things that poison our inner spirit. And finally, there's sadness. And the whole movie is about getting to know sadness. And sadness has an essential role to play, despite how much joy tries to silence her, subdue her, and keep her down. So these lessons from Inside Out relate to some work that is becoming more and more popular in the coaching and therapy worlds. It's called internal family systems, and it's sometimes called parts work. The person who popularized it is Richard Schwartz in a book called No Bad Parts. And I'd love to introduce some of that work to you today. Richard Schwartz's main premises are these. First of all, that having these inner voices is a natural part of the human experience. It's a natural state of mind. It's totally normal. Everybody's got it. It's totally okay. So don't feel bad and don't try to suppress the voices simply because they're there. You're not going crazy. Everyone's got the inner chatter. Allow it to be. It's natural and normal, and you're good. Second key lesson from Richard Schwartz is that parts develop their roles at key points in our life. There are certain times in our life where certain roles are needed to keep us safe. Just like Riley experienced it Inside Out, there are certain times where a certain role has to be there to feel safe and secure. And that's where these different parts and these different voices appear. It helps us get through the world of middle school and high school and elementary school. It helps us with the points in time where we have trauma or really hard life experiences. These parts appear and emerge at those times in order to coach us through that portion of our life. And then they stick around because they were useful and helpful. They stick around after that and they add to that inner chatter. As you can tell, there's a lot of them. That's the third point that Richard Schwartz brings up. You can think of these parts as a needy, squabbly family full of all sorts of different competing interests, all sorts of old past family history. This is why he calls it internal family systems. It's because you seem to have this like needy, squabbly family of voices speaking in your mind. And they are all there around the table, shouting over each other, interrupting one another, having developed some real crazy habits over the years and certain ways of being with one another. So it is an internal family system. It's a system of voices that you have. Another key point is that there are no bad ones. You don't have any bad ones. They're not good or bad. They're not right or wrong. Each part just exists. In fact, each part is a really special, wonderful, treasured member of our inner experience. They have a lot to teach us. One can often think of it as they've got a good side and a dark side. Sometimes they can really get in our way, but every single part also has an incredibly rich, beneficial, supportive side. Remember, they arrived because they were helping coach us through a certain point in time of our lives. They were necessary and useful. They've developed some skills over the years that are part of who we are now. Finally, there is a part, one special part, kind of like Joy was to Riley. It's yourself. The self part is one that kind of stands out from the rest. It is wiser. It is representing the present you, who you are right now today at your very best. That self is so much more experienced and so much more, brings in so much more wisdom and can kind of see above the inner chatter. It's like being able to stand on the balcony looking down on the kitchen table at the squabbly family. It's this person that's a little bit dissociated because they can look down and see what's happening from a slightly different view. And using that slightly different view, you can gain a lot of control and understanding and mastery over that internal family. So let me introduce this week's experiment. This week's experiment is to get to know your parts and to put some language around who the different parts are and how they show up in the world. This is not easy work, and it can take a very long time. I've been working on this for over 2 years, and it has been life transforming. And yet, it takes a lot of time and effort, and it takes coming back to repeatedly over time to get even more mastery over it. We're just going to scratch the surface today. So, some tips on this week's experiment. First of all, sometimes you have to earn a part's trust. Some of these parts have been buried and suppressed for a very long time. For instance, sadness in Riley has been suppressed and shut aside and sidelined for a very long time. And in order for sadness to come out to the surface and to be able to be introduced to yourself, it takes a little bit of kindness, gentleness. You got to slow down, stay curious, Be really compassionate, because it's only in that way that you can earn Sadness's trust and get to know her. So, first tip is really, sometimes you have to earn a part's trust. So take your time and go slow. Approach with a real open mind and an open heart, and a lot of curiosity and compassion. The other part is that parts talk all over one another. These inner chatter, that's what it's all about, is that they're very interrupty. They always jump in on top of each other, and they've been doing this for a very long time. You often have to have one part wait its turn while you're talking to another. So you really want to try to have one-on-one conversations. So when I ask you to open up the dialogue, if you notice that there's another voice that keeps coming in and you can't hear this other one, ask this other voice, the loud, interrupty one, to just sit to the side, wait your turn. I'll get to you in a minute, I promise. First, I want to have a conversation with this one. Then I'm going to have a really long conversation with this one, and it's okay for each one to wait their turn. Now, let me tell you about the process. The process is you're going to do a dialogue on paper as if you were writing a play. You're going to write self, ... and you're going to ask a question. Hey, who are you? Where are you? And get to know that part. The part is going to respond. You can put a little P for it for now. Eventually you'll figure out its name. And so you're going to do this back and forth as if you were writing a play. The important part is that it's the self that's you in your mind right now doing this work. The parts are going to simply have a little P on the paper to represent part, ... and you're simply going to put your pencil on the paper and wait for the part to speak up. Sometimes it even helps to take your other hand, your non-dominant hand, and to hold the pencil there. I know it'll feel really awkward, but it also helps get that dissociation, that separation, so that you can really get to know each part one by one. I'm going to share with you a list of questions that I'd love for you to ask. You can also ask any other questions that come to mind. These are not the only ones, but they are a really good starting place for this first dialogue with each part. The first questions are get to know you questions. Things like, how old are you? What do you look like? What do you sound like? Does their voice remind you of anybody? What's their name? Do they prefer to be male or female or non-binary? Do they have a personality that speaks up? Are they extroverted or introverted? Are they really, really shy or really, really outgoing? Do they talk loud and brash and are really open to the world? Are they angry a lot of the time, sad a lot of the time? Just get to know them. Find out who they are. Just like as if they were sitting across from you at a cafe table, meeting for the first time. Get to know them in that way. The next question to ask, set of questions, is what are they most proud of? What are the key turning point moments in their memory of who they are and how they showed up? When did they first show up? What was their role? And then the really important part of this is, what role do they play? How do they serve you? So find those things out from your inner voice. The next one is that often these parts are carrying a burden. They're carrying some weight. They're holding some big responsibility. What are they most afraid of? What have their big responsibilities been? And also in this realm, are there any responsibilities and burdens they've been carrying for years that they just want to lay down, that they're tired of carrying? And it'd be so nice to not to have to carry that anymore. Find out. Who knows? Maybe there is something. You might be very surprised by what they say. The next part, the next question to ask, what else do you want me to know? And let them speak. Find out what else there is in their experience or feelings or thoughts that they want you to know. And then, what do you want to know about me? Allow them to ask you any question and respond. What's often really surprising about some of these parts is that they don't know you very well. A part that came about a long time ago when you were bullied as a middle school child might still think, age-wise, you're only 14 or 15. They might not know how much life experience you've gained over the years. They might not recognize and realize what you've done, what your accomplishments have been. So go ahead and tell your part about you and see what happens. See if anything changes. And that's the experiment for this week. Try the inner dialogue process and see what happens. Now, I want to put this in a larger context. As I said, I've been doing this work for a while. This internal family systems work, this goal, this is the start. This lesson is for you to start to get to know your parts, to give them names, to get to know their personalities, and this will help you recognize when it is that they show up. If you take this work further, then there's a lot more that it can open up. And I just want to give you a quick little prelude. And this is work that I highly encourage you to work with a therapist or a coach on doing over time. So the next part that you can do in this IFS work is to start liberating your roles, liberating your parts from roles they've been forced to play, and help them get into roles that they were meant to play. So you get to find out what are their strengths and skills and weaknesses, and you help them move from a role they've been carrying for a long time into something they'd actually rather be. It's not all that different from managing a team. When you're managing a team, oftentimes you hire somebody in and you realize, you know what? They have really good skills for this role, but there's a role in the organization that would fit them even better. And you can find out what that is and figure out how is it that you can shift that individual and manage them well by managing them into other roles that they really prefer more and are really meant and designed to play better. That's one part of this work if you can take it further. Another one is to develop more trust in your own self-leadership. So that is leaning into that wise present you at your best, and having you be able to manage this whole team of others that are there to support you. It's helping you step into your own leadership over your own inner chatter. The third part is helping develop trust between the different individuals that are there on your team. So just like that squabbly family where the sister and the brother haven't talked to each other for years, sometimes one of the most healing things is to help that sister and brother, those two little voices, start to talk to one another again. And if you can do that, then this part work becomes really, really, really powerful. I've been able to find some amazing success in being able to actually put aside some of my needs that have been really, really clingy and needy for a very long time. I've always had this need to belong, this need to be part of something and be appreciated. And by doing this parts work, it's actually freed me from that need. I don't feel needy hardly as often anymore. I don't have that little inner voice that climbs up, takes over, and exerts its will on the world in really unhealthy ways. That's been so much more quiet because myself, my wise present self, is much more able to handle this situation and let that little inner child know, hey, it's okay, I gotcha. We got this. And to be able to take that inner child and put them into a role that suits them so much better. So that is what I wish upon you in the long term. For now, simply enjoy getting to know each of your parts and see what that experience does for you. Thank you so much for being here, wonderful leaders. Please share in the comments what this experience was like for you. Thank you.